worked for the U.S. Agency for International Development, had been to the United States without any problems, expedited visas, even worked for the FBI on a case that involved a terrorist in Pakistan, and was quite friendly with the U.S. government. But when he started learning about these cases of drones and the drone victims and started becoming a lawyer for some of the families of the innocent people who've been killed by our drones, he found that he was not so welcome by the United States. And when Columbia University had invited him over a year ago to come and speak at a symposium about drones, they would not give him a visa. When we wanted to invite him here for the Drone Summit, he told us, and many others told us, that they were just not going to let him in. And we said, well, give us a shot at it. We have a lot of supporters around the country, and we can at least cause a ruckus and show that they're not letting you in here and shame them. And so we started a campaign with people by the thousands calling the State Department and calling their Congress people and calling the U.S. Embassy. And even though many people said it would be impossible to get them to relent, just a couple of days before the summit was scheduled to start, they called Shahzad in to grant him his visa. So we are very, very delighted that he was able to be here. His talks have been so compelling. And he is somebody who left the corporate world and has really put his life on the line, because telling these stories, it's not just the U.S. government that doesn't like it. There's a lot of other people who don't like it. So please give a big hand to Shahzad.
Well, first, I didn't leave the corporate world just for drone. It was too dull to be there. Just before I start talking about our work in Pakistan, first of all, it's not just me who's working on it. I'm so glad since I've come to US and found that there's so many others who care about this topic, and they are eager to learn more what's happening on ground, and that's where we in Pakistan come in to bring in the human cost of this war. I'll just give you a brief intro about the stats of drones in Pakistan, which is not ours. It's done by the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, based in London, an independent journalist entity, and the only one who actually have people on ground in Waziristan where it's happening. So far, drone strikes starting from 2004 till now, the total number is 321 in Pakistan, out of which 269 are Obama's strike. And we all thought that Bush was worse. And and in total, these strikes have killed 3,097 people so far. And most of these people's identity is not known. According to the Bureau, the civilians who have been killed so far, and these civilians who Bureau has been able to identify as of their name, citizenship, where they were located, what their professions were, so far is 811, and it's a work in progress. Children out of these people are 174. So it's not a smaller number, but US decided that 174 children were good enough, or militants enough, so-called militants, to be killed. The best part of this, these stats are that the named militant who US has unofficially, not officially because officially Medea went to State Department last week and tried to take me along, and they refused to meet me. During that meeting, they were calling the program alleged drone program. They don't recognize it. The number of named militants, and their militancy, by the way, most of people's militancy is just suspicion, but there is a bigger number of Al-Qaeda people involved in this number. But the total number of named militants is 175. So to kill 175 people, we have killed 3,097 people. So these are stats in Pakistan on drones. Now, it's important to understand where drone strikes are happening and why CIA has been so successful in keeping the secrecy. One big reason they have partner in crime with them is Pakistani government. And the second is the area of target which they have chosen, and obviously the militants have chosen, because no one here wants the militants to take over the world, but at the same time we do not want the military to take over the world, which is CIA or Pentagon. First of all, everyone needs to know that there is more than 40,000 Pakistani military present in just North Waziristan, where the whole population is not more than 300,000. So there is no way that the military cannot go and take out the suspected terrorists or militants and try them in courts, be it military courts or the civilian courts. In that area, no information comes out. Journalists, independent sources are hardly allowed. How we and the Bureau of Investigative Journalists or other organizations work on the area is that we reach out to the locals there who volunteer or work for us as the ground source, and this is how we get to information. But every time they come out of that area, they are strip searched maybe 10 to 20 times just to come to the settled area, and then before reaching to the capital, which is about 300 miles away, many more searches for them. But another worrying thing is that drones are not finishing in Pakistan, but also starting in Yemen. Now in Yemen, if you look at drone stats from 2002 till 2012, and Yemen is another area where there's not a lot of information coming out because of strong hand on the media as well. Because the journalist who reported on a very recent drone strike is still in Yemeni prison, and he's just there without any trial or due process. So far the number of strikes is somewhere around 38. And out of, just in 38 strikes, they have been able to, or managed to kill 24 children, 105 civilians. The total number of killed is 651. And once again, names, identities, and the involvement in militant activity is not known. And I would also ask you to look into a very interesting paper written by an American general, currently even serving general now, General Michael Flynn. He is assistant director of DIA right now, and at that time when he wrote this paper, he was head of intelligence, American intelligence in Afghanistan. This paper came out in January 2010 in a journal published by Center for a New America Study. Now, according to him, he says that merely killing insurgents usually serves to multiply enemies rather than subtracting them. And this is coming out from a general who is in charge of intelligence. So if this is a fact in Afghanistan, why this is not fact in Pakistan, which starts exactly a mile after Afghanistan? The area which is targeted is same. People are Pashtuns, they are all Afghans by race, religion, everything is shared. And people who are living, they just have this border which is unmanned border, and they have everything shared. One family might be living on this side of the border, another side of the border. And by just killing these people, what we actually are doing, we are actually increasing the ranks of militants, because these people have no redressal available to them. I'll just talk about some of the people who we are representing. We are not representing any militants, although legally speaking, even their case requires representation in courts. But for sake of public perception, and in Pakistan, where we are the frontline state of suffering the menace of terror as well, we are not representing any militants in any court. We are representing all the civilian victims who the Bureau have identified, and some of them have been identified by our investigators on ground. Let's talk with Obama's first strike. President Obama's first strike came after 2 days of his inauguration on 23rd of January. That strike, that day, there were 2 strikes. Immediately report, 9 militant killed. Now in these 2 strikes, all civilians were killed. It was house of a person named Khalil Ahmed. He was a retired school teacher. His other brother, who was on wheelchair for the last 10 years, was also killed, along with other 5 male family members. And one youth of that family, Fahim Qureshi, who was a school-going child of 15 years at that time, was severely injured. He had to go through surgeries for months in Islamabad, the military hospital. He has lost his one eye as well, and now he is fighting that case on behalf of his family. And he's out there, and he's asking that my house was attacked on this day, and 9 of my family members were killed. So, and then this is another fact which was also established in Obama's war book, where it said that the first strike actually took out civilians. Another client who we're representing, his name is Sadaullah. His attack is also important because his attack was reported initially having killed an Al-Qaeda linked Pakistani Taliban. Now, when we looked into that strike, that leader had been killed 3 times before and 6 times later. His recent kill came out 3 months ago, and I have all my sureties that probably he'll re-emerge again. I mean, I don't want him to probably be living, but I don't want to be taking his life and the others' lives out in the name of making us safe. Now, this attack killed 4 of the family members of Sadaullah. Sadaullah was 14 years of age at that time, and now he is without both of his legs and one of his eye. He doesn't go to school anymore because school is about 2 miles away from his house, and there's no one able left in his family who can actually take him there. Only person who is taking care of him is his 95-year-old grandfather. And Sadaullah is left with no options. And these are some of the clients we are representing in courts in Pakistan. I'll just talk about why we are not in the US because, and the reason for that. Another very important strike was 23rd of August 2010. That was also in North Waziristan area, and that targeted 6 houses adjacent to each other. Now, 6 houses initially were told were hideouts of Haqqani network. Next morning, the newspapers were filled with pictures of children and women killed who were all Afghan refugees. Only one Pakistani person was killed in that drone strike, who was in the 7th house, a child sleeping in courtyard, aged 7, named Said Wali. And his father refused to bury him. Now, people in their culture in that area is that right after death, by any means, they immediately bury that person. But his father, going against their own religion and culture of that area, refused to bury him, and he was just shouting till he even lost his voice, that how come my son was a terrorist? And he died by this size shrapnel. Now, this tells you how precise the drone strikes are. Obviously, they're precise. If you target this chair, it will only target this chair, but the shrapnel might go there and kill a person who has slim skull or is a child. That person can be killed with that small piece of shrapnel. And the precision is based upon the intelligence you feed to them, and the level of ground intelligence you have just seen in your own country, that Medea Benjamin was allowed in talk of. If she was in Pakistan, she would be tortured by intelligence agencies by now.
With American help, probably.
No, one just last client I want to talk about. So we started working in 2010 on drone cases when I came across first client of mine who came with a very simple question to me, that am I not Pakistani enough or a human enough who has any rights in Pakistani courts? Because he was systematically told by existing human rights organizations in Pakistan that no matter what happened to you, unfortunately, we do not have jurisdiction in tribal areas. So whatever is happening there, it's unfortunate truth is that we cannot take that to the courts. I simply refused to buy that. I said, no, if some wrong is being done to you, something can be done. So when I reached out to the human rights community, they seemed very doubtful about any success. But I think success shouldn't be a barometer for any work in human rights. So when we started working, there were different projects we worked on. One of the project was that information needs to get out of that area. People in the rest of the world need to know what's really happening on ground. You put human stories, human life stories, human sufferings out there, and then let people be judged how accurate drone strikes are and what is the human cost of all this war. We reached out to some of organizations in the US and in UK, and we came up with a plan of transparency cameras. So the idea was that we distribute cameras to youth of Waziristan and ask them to upload pictures of any drone strike, any militant strike or any military strike. Whatever they see there, they just take pictures and just put it out there. Now there is no connectivity in Waziristan, but they could send it to us or they could go to another city and upload it themselves. We just gave them the cameras without any ties attached, with very simple training how to operate cameras and how to upload pictures. Tariq Aziz, a 16-year-old boy, was the most motivated of that lot. We did with 50 initial people. We brought them to Islamabad. That week we had training for the camera receivers, and then we had some international jurists and international human rights activists gathered in Islamabad, and we had a drones conference in Islamabad where Tariq, along with other 150 tribals from Waziristan, participated. He spent 3 days, like many others, with us. on 28th of October, he travels back to Waziristan, and on 30th of October 2011, he is killed in a drone strike while driving his mother to the doctor, along with his even younger cousin, who we believe was 12 years old. Now in that area, there is no birth certificate and people do not keep record and they do not celebrate birthdays. When this was reported by ABC, an ABC reporter reached to the CIA contact in Islamabad, the contact said to him that yes, a youth was killed who was a militant. The guy was not 16, he was 17, as if they knew, because Tariq himself didn't know how old he was. And the other youth age is also doubtful, although they admitted that he was a child, but they said that they both were militants. If Tariq Aziz was a militant, he was in Islamabad. He was right 1 mile away from American Embassy, within the jurisdiction of all law enforcement agencies and police and everyone. They could have arrested him. They could have tortured him in Guantanamo if they wanted. At least that would have saved his life. But this attack simply shows you how random the selection of target and how bizarre their intelligence on ground is. They simply have nothing on ground, but politically it seems so good that there are no boots on ground and we're still fighting the war on terror. So everyone back home is happy, defense industry is happy, drone caucus is happy, and American public is happy because there are no boots on ground. And who cares if people are dying in Pakistan, because our own Prime Minister, according to WikiLeaks, said to American ambassador in 2009 that civilian deaths might disturb Americans, it certainly doesn't disturb me. So you can kill as many you want. Now just quickly talking about the litigation we are doing in Pakistan. When we started our campaign in Pakistan, we said, okay, first of all, we need to do something outrageous. So the outrageous thing we did was that we found out name of CIA station chief in Islamabad and took him to criminal court for homicide, for murder. So that became a big thing because this was unthinkable. Last time it was done was in 1949. So that made me immediately persona non grata. All Western journalists in Islamabad were told that not to talk to this person. He's a ISI agent. And some of the journalists didn't buy that, and some of them actually forgot that I represented many of them free of cost in courts against ISI before. The reason for doing that was, one, CIA station chief actually gave us jurisdiction in Islamabad. It's a legal argument, I won't go into too much into detail. But the second thing was that you do something outrageous and then everyone start listening to you. So at that time everyone is saying that, why aren't you doing anything against your own government? So we said, we didn't say anything. We said, we're just taking out against CIA because CIA is doing this, and reality is CIA is running this program. Drone strikes were bilateral till 2009, and after 2009 they have become unilateral. So before Pakistani intelligence agency was involved, and after 2009 now the US CIA is carrying out these strikes unilaterally. So we waited for 6 months, let everyone accept what we were doing, and then we went against Pakistani government. And Pakistani government cases we took in constitutional courts, asking some questions from Pakistani governments like why they are not protecting the rights of their own citizens. Their right to life is sacred, inviolable, you cannot violate that even in case of war, and you are failing to enforce that right. We pointed out, Prime Minister is one of the respondents in that case, so we pointed that quote from WikiLeaks out, and then his several quotes from parliamentary debates where he condemned drone strikes. He refused that if there is any agreement or consent between Pakistani and American government. So all these questions we have put before Pakistani courts, who are going to take up, because our cases like the Olaki case in United States hasn't been thrown out. That case is very much there. The CIA case is now reaching the judgment stage. Arguments and evidence have completed, and we are expecting a judgment anytime in May and or maximum in June. We have also reached out to other countries. In United Kingdom, there was one particular strike of 2011, 17th March, which had killed tribal elders. So we took tribal elders, a council of tribal elders, to a court in a high court in London, asking British government for their involvement in drones, because they are on record saying that they provide intelligence for drone strikes in Pakistan. And in United Kingdom, there's a rule that you cannot be party to any assassination of such kind. 32 British nationals have been also killed, most probably militants. But the law in Europe is such that none of the European state can be involved to assassination of their own citizens, unlike United States. But United Nations Human Rights Council, recently we filed representation on behalf of 35 families we're representing in drone, who are drone victims. And then we immediately went to Pakistani higher court and asked the government to join that petition, and Ministry of Foreign Affairs is party to that. So basically, just giving you an overview that we are doing everything which we can while living under a corrupt government which cannot stand for their own people and enforcing their right. They cannot look into American governments and say that it's our incompetence that terrorism is increasing in that area, and people you are killing, they are not actually the militants, and killing is definitely not the solution to the problems. The importance here is that people who are in the United States, they need to reach out to their representatives. They need to ask questions if drone program is making their lives safer, because this is the whole point of killing people, that this is making us safer. How is this making us safer when we're making more enemies? People who had no international agenda, we have given them agenda. Al-Qaeda was a very small group located in only 1 or 2 locations in the world. Now Al-Qaeda is all over the world. Biggest Al-Qaeda concentration and sleeping cells are in Europe now. So what will happen next? Would this war finish? We have given Taliban a universal goal now to hate America. Before that, Taliban were just in Afghanistan, and they had a very regional or actually national agenda. Whatever they were doing, or at least they were doing to their own people. Now they're all out there, and they have all reasons to go against anyone they want who was on war with them for 11 years. So these are the questions you need to ask. 2010 attack, 23rd August. 6 houses when they were attacked, and they killed several children and women. The cost just for missile of that was around $1 million. So I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for listening to me.
Thanks very much for that. And now we open the floor for questions.
It seems that the same humanitarian arguments against landmines stand for the drones. Is there any attachment to their legislation and their success that we can use to apply to this campaign?
And this came up during the Drone Summit. There is a group called the International Committee for Robot Arms Control, ICRAC for short. And it is scientists, professors. They have been modeling themselves after the landmines and cluster bombs campaigns. They've been meeting with people who've been involved in those campaigns. There's a problem, though, and I've spoken to Nobel Peace Prize winner Jody Williams, who was involved and got the prize for her campaigning around landmines, and she said landmines are chump change, and were chump change compared to drones. Drones are a multi-billion-dollar business right now. She's the one who really said, don't fool yourself, you're not going to get rid of drones. But we have to find some way to regulate them, unlike landmines where it's a campaign to get rid of them. The International Committee for Robot Arms Control, they're going with what they think is the easiest route to begin with, and that's going after the next generation of drones, which is in the research stage. And that's when you don't even have a remote pilot 10,000 miles away, when you have no pilot at all, that these are pre-programmed, called autonomous drones. They want to stop them from being used before they're started. So their campaign is to stop lethal autonomous drones and then sort of work their way back from there. But we were very excited to have a group of them with us this weekend in Washington, D.C., and they are stronger in Europe than they are here. You know, this is often the case where other countries are much better at trying to rein in our own military than we are. And so we're excited that there's groups in France. In fact, the French military, they say, is very interested in working with on this because they don't like the drones at all. Whether it's because they're macho bomber pilots and don't want to say, hey, I'm not going to sit in some little box and press a button, or because they really see where this is taking us in a world of lawlessness and chaos. But they are reaching out to allies around the world, both within the military, within governments, and of course building up a grassroots campaign.
Okay, some more questions. Meantime, Medea, could you just clarify about an autonomous drone? I must say I don't completely understand what that's all about.
Well, right now you have a drone that is, the drones being used are what they call drones with a human in the loop. So the human is the one that operates the drones, although not in the cockpit. They're the ones that have the sensors, they're the ones that decide when they're going to drop the Hellfire missile. When it's a pre-programmed drone, it can be told you are going for the heat sensor, you're going for somebody who has a weapon, you're programmed what it is that you're looking for. And these drones are out, and now they're talking about drones that can be up there indefinitely being refueled in the air, and they're just out there looking for their targets.
Okay. Yes.
My name is Greg Minchell, and I have a question for the attorney from Pakistan. So you say that there are 14,000 military in North Waziristan and 42,000 civilians or something like that. So why do you think the use of drones rather than using the military that's on the ground in order to apprehend? Is there sort of a conspiracy theory, or why do you think that that's happening?
The number of military present in North Waziristan is more than 40,000, and the number of the population in just North Waziristan is 300,000. President Obama, when he was on Google Talk and for the first time admitting that US is carrying out drone strikes in Pakistan, at that time they said that we are taking targets out in places where no one can reach, and Pakistani military or law enforcement agencies have no reach. So to counter his argument, Pakistani 7th Corps is in North Waziristan. Their headquarters is in Miramshah, and if you look at the stats, most of the targets are either in Miramshah or Data Khel, which are 7 miles apart. So your corps is there, your lieutenant general is sitting there along with all his brigadiers and majors and colonels and 40,000 troops. So if there are elements, they should be just taken out. I think it makes job probably easier for everyone that you're just taking out targets who you think might be involved in the insurgency in Afghanistan, because that is the underlying reason for drone program in Pakistan, and that also is based upon faulty intelligence. Problem here is that it's not a conspiracy theory, but on one side we have seen United States complaining and CIA complaining that their ally in Pakistan, the Pakistani intelligence agency, is unreliable, but up till very recently they have been relying on their intelligence to take out drones. Now in this area, for human intelligence, it has to be Pakistani intelligence, otherwise there's no way of getting intelligence out of there. So they are themselves admitting that they're relying on faulty intelligence to take out strikes. So it's not a conspiracy theory, probably a fact.
I'm Mel Duncan from Nonviolent Peace Force. My question is, do you see standing in the International Criminal Court, other international courts, or perhaps even the United States courts for the prosecution of the Obama administration?
Well, I have to say there is standing, but for that my government has to be taking that claim. As individuals, we have very limited role that we can play. As first step, we have gone to United Nations Human Rights Council and filed a representation on behalf of 35 families. And as second step, we have gone to Pakistani High Court in Islamabad and saying that Pakistani government takes up that petition, because this is something what they should be doing. We are not asking to start a war against the United States by taking the drone down. In an ideal world, they should be doing that. But let's say if you cannot do that, at least what you can do is you can reach out to all these forums available. But one other problem we have is that US does not submit to the jurisdiction of International Court of Justice or ICC. So this is another problem we're facing. And the other problem is that if you're not an American citizen, you have very limited rights if you come to United States courts. And ATS, which is Alien Torts statute, that provides very limited options available. And what has happened in Ulaki's case, which was filed by Center for Constitutional Rights, it was immediately thrown out by US courts on the basis that we are at war and we cannot do these silly things.
We have declared war on Pakistan.
No ma'am. There is no declared war.
Declares war.
Yes, there is no war against Pakistan or even with Yemen. And Pakistan is the front allied state in war against terror, war of terror.
It's on the grounds of national security.
Okay, let's see, I have some questions. Yes?
My name is Joan Davis. I'm with the Grey Panthers, and
it seems like this has been occurring since 2002, and it's 10 years already. And I think the first I heard about it was about perhaps the tail end of last year. So, or there was something April, there was a demonstration against something upstate New York. I think we have a very deep problem with how our government uses secrecy. And I think we have to have a frontal attack on that. What shape that will be, God only knows. And we're certainly struggling with it. I wanted to say that they will, in all likelihood, since this is a toy for some people, aside from the fact that it's money, but it's a game. It's a way of playing. They have they want to improve and refine the weaponry. Well, they've done that. Perhaps we can have some, since we cannot, the genie is out of the bottle, we cannot stuff her back in. Can we have some kind of active limitation on further R&D as to refining the equipment and the exactitude of this weapon? Because it's disgusting, everybody knows that, so, but perhaps. I present that as an idea. How that could be accomplished, I don't know.
Well, that's precisely what this International Committee for Robot Arms Control is trying to do. They're trying to stop the further research and deployment of the next round of drones. They say, think of drones now as you thought of airplanes when the Wright brothers were flying. This is just the beginning. If we could stop the next iteration of drones, that's what they're aiming for. But I think you're right. The genie is out of the bottle, whatever you want to, metaphor you want to use, but it is a question about secrecy, and it's a question of being a big business, and it's a question of the American people being fooled into thinking that this is a good way of, a more humane way of getting people who are out to get us. So we have a lot of work to do, and maybe I should just take a moment to say a couple of the things that came out of the Drone Summit. One is really to say education, 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 that we are a far cry where we can mobilize large numbers of people around this. We talked about having an International Day Against Drones with teach-ins all over the country, doing it on September 21st, International Peace Day, having the universities, the Occupy movements, protests at the bases where the drones are being piloted, do it all together on one day. We talked about reaching out to the faith-based community because we felt that this is really an ethical, a moral issue, that it's reprehensible to us that you would have people killing as if it were a game, not putting U.S. lives at risk, but willy-nilly, unlike Obama said, we're not doing this willy-nilly. I think we can say willy-nilly, we are deciding who's to live and die, being both prosecutor, jury, executioner. And so we want to get this talked about in churches, mosques, synagogues, and we're working with the Fellowship of Reconciliation to come up with a statement that they want to get religious leaders to sign on to. We also talked about the disclosure that just came out about who has permits for research of drones at home, and a lot of the best universities in this country. So talking to students, we're already working, or Ann just met with students at Johns Hopkins about trying to get them to have a campaign that would demand that they stop doing research on these weapons, and also they divest from companies that are involved in the production of lethalized drones. There's I think within the legal community, there's lots of new ideas of ways to take this into the courts. And we are pushing the human rights community, and I do want to say for any of you who have contacts with Human Rights Watch or Human Rights First, we were very disappointed. They did not come to the Drone Summit despite us having hounded them to come to the Drone Summit. They have taken a position that drones are not bad, that there just have to be more transparency about the use of them. And we feel that if we can't get our human rights community to come out with us and stand with us and say this is a gross violation of international law. Imagine if every country in the world thought it had the right to get itself a drone and kill somebody that it wanted to kill, what kind of world is this? So anybody interested in working with us in any of these areas or have your own ideas, please come see me or Ann over there or any the folks who will be at the table selling the books. Thanks.
Okay, Kathy.
I'm Kathy Fitzpatrick. I'm with Physicians for Human Rights. I wondered if you had the figures for how many are injured from drone attacks and have lost their homes. And then I just wanted to clarify, on those 3,000 plus, you said that only 175 were identified as militants. Was it the U.S. that made that acknowledgement, or where did that come from? And if I could just follow up with one sort of larger question to follow up what this other woman said. Are we in fact at war with Pakistan? Because it seems like we didn't share intelligence with the assassination of bin Laden. And there was this case of the drones killing the 24 soldiers. The U.S. refuses to apologize for that. I realize those aren't your cases, but do you have any sense of why do they refuse to apologize if they don't view it as friendly fire?
First of all, the stats which I gave, the total number of injured is anywhere between 700 to 900. This is, I think, TBIJ's estimate. But we on ground, for example, out of all cases we are working on, we have about, I think, 10 survivors who survived the strikes and they were injured. But the total number of injured, and one reason of not having that many injured, because this is a very precise weapon which only kills. It doesn't take prisoners and it doesn't injure you. Most of the time it kills. People who are injured, they're either in the other rooms or they were in close vicinity, and that's how they survive. Pakistan and US are not at war, legally speaking. Pakistan is the allied state of US in this war. The strike, bin Laden strike, it was resented not on the basis that Pakistanis were either harboring bin Laden or they wanted bin Laden not to be apprehended. They retaliated on the basis of violation of their sovereignty. But this is, I think, the cost of Pakistani government for being quiet for 7 years on drone strikes, and when it happened, complete the military strike on ground, this was, I think, just the continuation of when US thought that it's quite easy to violate international borders and go into a country where you're not at war with. The recent incident, which is 23 Pakistani soldiers killed, they were killed in not on a drone, but in a NATO strike with 3 helicopters. So 3 helicopters actually assassinated 23 soldiers. It was a whole checkpoint on the borders, basically to actually, their job was to stop militant infiltration into the country, and NATO took all of them. Pakistan has been, and that's the reason there is no intelligence exchange anymore, and there are talks going on between US and Pakistan, but US says that we will not apologize and we can do anything short of apology. They're ready to give money and money for the soldiers' family and everything, but apology is not coming, and this time I don't think it's Pakistani government, it's probably the military, which actually looks really bad to its own soldiers for letting their own ally kill their own 23rd soldiers, and this operation was carried out for 2.5 hours. It wasn't very, come and go. So practically, yes, it seems that they are at war, but legally speaking, no.
Just one follow-up. Have you tried to get compensation from the U.S. Armed Forces for the families? Have they at all volunteered?
For the NATO strike or this?
For drone victims, then?
Yeah, for the
The
drone.
drone victims, drone program is carried out by CIA. But, US military doesn't have any involvement.
Well, have you tried to formally ask them for compensation?
They don't talk to me anymore.
We had somebody at our the Drone Summit who has been working on that, and I want to recognize Adele Welty here from September 11th Families for Peaceful Tomorrows, and she has worked with us in the beginning of the Afghan war to pressure the military to give compensation to innocent victims. Shahzad has invited us to take a large delegation of Americans to Pakistan at the end of September, early October, a week-long trip to meet with these tribal leaders and to meet with families of the victims and some of the surviving victims. And if any of you are interested in that, maybe you could just put a star by your name on the sign-up sheet and we can keep in touch with you about information.
Ann Wright, should we put a bullseye target by our name as we sign up for that Pakistan list?
A star would be better.
Just a star, thank you, a little star for heaven. Could you comment on what the Pakistani parliament has been doing in terms of its displeasure with the United States, and then what has happened with the logistics movement of material through Pakistan or not through Pakistan for NATO and U.S. forces in Afghanistan?
On drones, Pakistani parliament actually has passed 3 resolutions. All 3 of them have been unanimous. The latest being 12th of April 2012, presented by the Pakistani Parliament Committee on National Security. And the first clause of that resolution was that drone strikes in Pakistan are illegal, they are not tolerated by Pakistani government, and they are a violation of Pakistani sovereignty, and they are counterproductive. So Pakistani parliament stance has been very clear, but at the same time we have to understand that they are actually cheating with their own people, not taking any concrete step, but just passing resolutions. So this is basically more of a lip service by Pakistani politicians right now, and this is going to become a very important point in coming elections in Pakistan. So far Pakistani parliament role has been just passing on the resolutions. Right after the Salala checkpoint NATO strike which killed 23 soldiers in Pakistan, the NATO supplies, which actually I think covers for 80% of NATO ground supplies in Afghanistan for forces, that has been suspended by Pakistani parliament, and that's not allowed. Mark Grossman, representative of US for Afghanistan and Pakistan, was in Pakistan a week ago, and the talks failed because once again US refuses to apologize for the strike on Pakistani soldiers. So Pakistani parliament stance, they have given in their 12th April resolution, which is very clear that as long as US is not apologizing for its act and admits its mistake, NATO routes from Pakistan will not be opened.
NATO what from Pakistan?
Routes.
Supply routes.
Supply routes.
I'm actually curious if you could, I'm curious the name of your organization that you use to represent the victims of drone strikes, but I'm also curious if you are familiar with any of the R&D that's being done at particularly Technion University in Israel, if you're familiar with that, and what you know about the potential contract, I believe it is, that's being arranged between Technion and the NYPD for supplying drone technology.
Sounds like you know a lot more about it.
I know that about that much. So
They're going to set up a branch in New York very soon.
Technion?
yeah, Technion.
Yeah.
About your question about Technion, I have no information or knowledge of that, and as Medea said, you are more knowledgeable on that. Our foundation in Pakistan is called Foundation for Fundamental Rights. Its website is rightsadvocacy.org, and we work also with Reprieve in UK, which is a legal British charity working on Guantanamo, Bagram, and issues like drone strikes.
So because so much of this is done in secrecy, it's very hard for us to get the information, but there is now a global network coming together, including a lot of independent journalists who are doing some very good research. I just got something sent to me yesterday about research of sales to countries in Latin America that we didn't know about. Somebody doing some really good research on drones use in other parts of Asia. And we're going to put this all up on the Drones Watch website. It's a brand new website that we started a couple of days ago after the Drone Summit, when we realized there needed to be a place for all of this information to be gathered. So we'd like to talk to you afterwards about what you know and how we can learn more and make it available to a wider community.
I think I have somebody over there.
Do you have any information on the United Nations being involved in drone strikes or planning to?
Not that we are aware of. In Pakistan, drone strikes, we've been looking for quite recently of any strikes from allied countries like Britain, because now there is new suspicion that some of the drone strikes which were actually given to the Americans might have been taken out by the United Kingdom's government, but there is no indication or information to our knowledge so far by United Nations.
I know there's certainly interest, and they've talked about the peacekeepers needing drones because this is a way to gather information, again, without putting the peacekeepers' lives at risk. In the coming NATO summit that's going to be happening in Chicago, some folks are doing more research about NATO and drones, and it turns out the U.S. has sold $1 billion worth of drones to NATO very recently. The sales are really proliferating, and if you go to the website of the association AUVSI, it's the Association of Unmanned Vehicles International, you'll see that it's got thousands of companies that are part of this. If you are a student of life, as most of you in this room are, you can join for only $75. And then you can get their information and go to some of their exhibits and conferences, and it's quite appalling, but you can see how they're pushing the United Nations to get drones, they're pushing drones on our allies, but they're also very pushing right now for openings for the United States to sell drones to very undemocratic regimes like throughout the Middle East.
I'm going to propose an outrageous idea, and, you know, the idea for a long time has been in my mind that there should be a moratorium on sales of weapons. I'd like to see it. I don't know how. But I am appalled that we are selling that this is, you know, and how to fight that is what we need to develop. I mean, maybe we'll go to sleep without an idea and wake up in the morning with one. I was wondering about the R&D with universities. Because universities, the prices for students are going up. Could we have an onslaught of opinions for what they are teaching our children? Because war should not be the top priority, and refining equipment for war is, you know, I'd like to see some onslaught against the universities for allowing this R&D. Because I think it perverts what the ethics of knowledge is and should be or could be, and it's outrageous, and that's why I'd like to see an onslaught.
Could you talk about the level of defense research going to these universities, DARPA, also the issue of swarming drones, and also the issue of U.S. being the biggest exporter of drones, but Israel being the next biggest exporter and the one that has the most experience in killing people, with over 900 people in Gaza being killed with drones.
Hearing that thing about swarming reminds me, I believe they have drones that are the size of a grasshopper. I'd like to hear about that. Yeah, you, sir.
Listening to your talks, I'm not convinced that I heard stuff that would convince 80% of Americans to be against drones. But one of the things that to me is very important, but I don't really know how to formulate it, and I'd be interested in an elaboration, is this issue of boots on the ground. That if we're going to fight wars, we have to commit actually our bodies to fighting the wars. Of course, the bodies of our sons and our maybe daughters to some extent. And trying both from an ethical point of view and even a self-interest point of view, in terms of, you know, high-tech warfare breeding terrorism, atomic nuclear terrorism and stuff like that. Those seem to me things that are important to try to elaborate and stuff like that.
We have not been at war legally with anybody since the Korean War.
Could you name the companies that manufacture the drones? And also, you made the statement that every time there's a drone strike, it alienates so many people and makes more militants. Is there a correlation between drone strikes and suicide bombings or any kinds of militant bombings?
There is a strong correlation between suicide bombing and drone strikes, because the suicide bombing in Pakistan were dominantly being carried out by an organization called TTP, Tariq-e-Taliban Pakistan. They call themselves Pakistani Talibans. Now, TTP's leader, Baitullah Masood, and later on Hakimullah Masood, they're on record saying that drone strikes are actually helping them finding more drone victims. And we have seen various DVDs going around in not just Waziristan, actually in whole tribal area, where they show pictures of children and women being killed and their body parts just to recruit more people. This is what Pakistani government is saying, that this is counterproductive, and this is what General Michael Flynn said in his article as well, that you're just by killing insurgents, you're just giving birth to more insurgents.
You say, how do we convince the 80% of Americans out there that think drones are good? By saying that we have been using these since 2002 and we haven't won. And how long are we going to keep using them? And doesn't this just feed the cycle of violence? There's so many things we can point to. For example, a Pakistani independent commission was asked to research the drone strikes, came out with a long report, but the summary says drone attacks counterproductive, cause loss of valuable lives and property, radicalize the local population, create support for terrorists, and fuel anti-American sentiments. I give many examples in the book of coming from the Human Rights Special Rapporteur, coming from members of the U.S. military, coming from other countries, whatever you think is your best source to use, but we have many, many sources from a variety of different places coming at this to say it's counterproductive, it doesn't work. And then in the larger scheme of things, as I point out and give examples in the book, for example, there's a RAND study, not a radical study done by RAND, that looks at 268 examples in the last 40 plus years of terrorist organizations, terrorist groups, and how what has been their demise. And it shows that 40% of them were from good policing, another 40% were negotiations, and just 7% were from the use of military force. It just doesn't work. And we hear President Obama saying yesterday, we are talking to the Taliban. So we are talking to the Taliban. The end result is going to be negotiations. How long do we have to wait? How much do we have to prolong it? How many people have to die until those negotiations actually happen? I would say the drone strikes just keep prolonging it and keep feeding the military-industrial complex. And that goes into Ann's question about DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, that has been credited with really promoting this drone technology. And they do it in all kinds of ways, which is from getting hobbyists and citizen scientists involved, putting out a contest for $100,000 if you can make a drone that can fit in a knapsack. And yes, now there are drones that are the size of insects. There are the drones that are modeled after insects. There are drones that are modeled after hummingbirds. I describe in the book all the different kinds of drones that are being researched, and we talk about the many thousands and thousands of drones that are now being bought by the Pentagon. The majority of them are the small drones, not the big drones that we've been talking about today. The research and development of these is coming directly from our tax dollars that go to the Pentagon. It keeps the military-industrial complex well-oiled even during a time when we are facing financial crisis. And I guess the last thing I want to end on is the woman from the Grey Panthers who talks about two things. One, it's trying to feed our children into this cycle of violence, and even in a more gruesome way, I think, because it's being portrayed as a toy, a game. There's no accident that they took the PlayStation as the model for the remote control of the drones. And the other is how much it's robbing our young people of a future by continuing to, as Eisenhower said, steal the money from our future by fueling this never-ending cycle of violence. As we move towards the part of the event here that's about the book sales, I want to acknowledge, I see my publisher right here in the room, John Oakes from Aura Books, who put out the book in record time, so please give him a hand. Thanks.
I mean, we're still doing that. The Pentagon stuff.
Yeah. We're going on the 19th.
Young people. And military industrial. It is. Take care. Thank
I thought you would here. We've been to Iran together and done a lot of work around trying to stop the war with Iran. Yeah, and our group has chief cooking.
We had stopped John Brennan the day before at 3 different places, at CNN, Fox News, and ABC, at 7:30 in the morning.
He did look a little cowed.
Oh, he was in shell shock by the time we got him the 3rd time.
A little scared.
And then Medea got him the next day. It was like, what in the hell?
She got him again.
Yeah, well, we got him 3 times on Sunday. And then she found out kind of at the last moment that he was speaking over at the Wilson Center, so she raced over there and got in, and then, but if she's in any place, boy, you know that stand back.
You guys are on the front lines. We're just we're just a publisher.
We need those publishers, you know.
Well, it's too bad. There's so much to get upset about.
There is.
In very simple terms, could you explain the flaw in the good guy, bad guy logic that excuses the U.S.? I mean, the U.S. kills people around the world. Sometimes we call it war or police action, whatever. And we explain to the public that it's okay to do that because we're killing the bad guys.
Whenever government goes after the bad guys to make themselves good, they have to do things right. And doing things right is doing within due process of law. So this is first thing which governments need to do. And second thing is that we have to really challenge now that have we really been going after the bad guys? Because, 10 years of war and we are still at war. And a war which we haven't won, where the whole world, all nations went against a couple of nations, or not even nations, a group actually, smaller number of people. And after 10, 11 years, we haven't won that war. So it means, we didn't go after the bad guys. We've been just killing people who were not even involved in this whole bad guy and good bad thing. So the bad guys means that they're pretty much out there. So we just have to now think of another strategy how to deal with them, because killing hasn't worked for the last 11 years.
Well, to put it another way, there once was an evil empire, and Uncle Sam was the name. As you made it kind of clear today, the people we kill are people who are defending their country's sovereignty.
Yes.
And that's what we call the bad guys. Yep. So when we illegally invade another country or do some violation of their sovereignty, it is appropriate that we're the bad guys and the people who resist us are the good guys. So we just committed a crime of violating their sovereignty, killing, destroying, whatever.
I agree on that, but by going after the bad guys in a bad way, in an unjust way, we just made ourselves all bad. Now that thin distinction between good and bad has gone. It has blurred somewhere because we just made this war of people who are fighting for their self-rule, their self-independence. They have an occupying force in their country. So if, for example, I do not talk about Afghanistan, what I say is like, what if my country tomorrow is attacked by any other country? Any other country, and that country forces are occupying the country, then I have right under the law to fight against that occupying force. And this is what is happening. Look at Iraq's example. In Iraq, what you did was, you said they have Al-Qaeda links. There was not even a single Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and today Al-Qaeda is everywhere in Iraq. Al-Qaeda is fighting the insurgency against the occupying forces. So this is what we are doing. We are just multiplying the ranks of enemies, the so-called enemy of the Western civilization or the world civilization. So we are certainly not making it safe for anyone.